Hey everybody, I wanted to make a quick video walking you through some things you need to think about as you choose your students for component 2 and as you think about who those students are and what they need right now at this time, which are your goals. And then I want to talk to you about the instructional context. So your next assignment in Canvas to upload before the next meeting is to work through this think sheet that I'm about to show you, upload it, of course, before the meeting, and let's just get right to it. I'll share my screen. I'll show you what is on the think sheet. So here it is, and I just put this together as a way to help you think through how to choose your students. And then some other things, but most of you will have to, your directions say to choose 2 students. Now for some certificate areas, it's just 1. So typically when you're told to choose 2 students, you refer to them as student A and student B. So this table that I developed has student A and student B, and then the questions are the same. But if your certificate area only tells you to choose 1 student, then obviously you're only going to fill in student A because you only choose 1 student. So over here, you would type, who your student is. Let's say I choose Robin. I would type in Robin. Now, your directions say you can't refer to students by first and last name. You can use a first name or you can use an initial. That's up to you, but just not first and last name. And then you need to tell why, the characteristics of the student, and then why you chose to feature this student. Well, I think the question says, what instructional challenges does this student present to you? Now, if you're choosing 2 different students, if you're told to choose to feature 2 students, you need to choose students who present different challenges to you. And then that way you have the opportunity to showcase more of your teaching practice, how you really rise to the occasion of teaching students with different strengths and needs. Now, of course, you're going to choose students that will allow you to do that. So for example, you wouldn't choose a student who presents challenges that you're just really not good at meeting, obviously, because this is about your accomplished teaching practice. So choose students with who present challenges to your instruction, but you have to be sure you rise to those challenges. You're showing your very best teaching practices here. And so once you type the student name here, you're just going to go through and answer the questions in this column about the student. What are the characteristics of this student? And I develop this table so that when you start writing, not just your instructional context, but your entire written commentary, you can go back to this and then you won't maybe fall into the trap of just talking about cognitive development and how the student looks on paper, the data that a computer churns out. That's not what the National Board says that that's not the standard for teaching that you're supposed to meet according to National Board Standard 1. Knowledge of students includes all of these things. I would strongly urge you to open up that standard and look through it as you're filling out this table. So tell who the student is, and I have a note here, see Standard 1. And then how did you gather this information? And here's where you can include a lot of evidence of core proposition 5. You may have gotten it from an interest inventory. You may have gotten it from a parent survey. You may have gotten it from home visits. You may have gotten it from phone calls or a text chain with a parent or an email chain with a parent. So you tell, how do you know this? How do you know all the ways you just described this student? So there are a variety of ways, formal and informal assessments. You watch them at work, you watch them at play, you watch them in the cafeteria. You might attend some of their social functions outside of school to learn more about them. You can get information from your colleagues, from members of the geographic community, maybe a Girl Scout leader or the Boys and Girls Club director. So who is this child? A picture of the whole child, not just cognitive. How did you gather the information, not just formal and informal assessments that you administered in the classroom, but also talking to the child, talking to people who know the child, such as family, other colleagues, and community members, and go on down. And why did you choose to feature the student? So how can you show your instructional strengths and differentiation while still making sure the student stays fully a part of the classroom community? A trap that teachers fall into is once they start writing up their instruction, they write up instruction for just this one student, and it looks as if you are isolating the student from the entire community. And of course, you don't want to do that. You want to keep the student a fully integrated part of the community while differentiating based on his or her strengths and needs. And so then you just repeat that for student B if you're if your directives tell you to choose 2 students. And then this column, in most of your instructional context, you're going to have to include characteristics of the entire class. So tell who the class is, who are they as a whole, who are the outliers, what are patterns, and that type thing. I have some examples for you on another handout. And so then how did you gather this information about the entire class? Sort of a repeat of over here. And then begin thinking about this student's particular contributions to the classroom community, interactions between the student and the community. I put this here to remind you not to look as if you're teaching that student in isolation. Even though you're differentiating and personalizing and individualizing, student is still part of a classroom community, and we need to know that. You're not just singling out the student. And so then, of course, you wouldn't necessarily have to repeat all of this, like who is the class? It's the same class as above, but you might want to just repeat this. Begin thinking about this particular student in association with the rest of the class. And as always, how does this influence your instruction? So all the things you're telling us, why are you telling us that? It needs to be because it influences your instruction in some way. And then this other column is the goals. So what are the goals for this period of learning? Why are they appropriate for these students at this time? And remember, goals are stated in terms of what students will know or be able to do as a result of this lesson or series of lessons, whatever your directions tell you. Goals are not activities, so you won't say students will do experiments or students will read books about animals. That may be an activity they do to reach an ultimate goal, but remember, goals are the measurable outcomes that you're going to measure, like using some sort of assessment. So think of verbs that are measurable. And then also goals are not what you are going to do. So you wouldn't say, my goal is to teach students to, no, because you're stating that in terms of a verb that you're going to do. No, absolutely not. This is what the student, what are your learning outcomes, your learning targets for the students as a result of this lesson or unit of instruction? What will the students know or be able to do as a result of this instruction? And it has to be measurable. So if you say something like, the student will understand this, well, unless you're going to be very explicit about how you're going to measure that understanding, might want to choose a different goal there. You might want to say students will analyze something or evaluate something, or all of those verbs that we can clearly measure through assignments and activities. So after you fill out this table for 1 or 2 students, depending on what your directions say, then come on down and just type a draft of your instructional context right here. I have some notes for you to remember. There are some guiding questions under instructional context in your component 2 directions, and those are in italics. We recommend that you put those questions out here in a comment function, and then so that you'll be sure that you answered all of them. Again, keep your standard 1 open while you're answering those questions. Again, tell how and from what sources you gained this information. Anything you list about these students, we want to see that later show up as affecting your instruction. If you say the student has trouble speaking English as a first language, and then if your instruction doesn't acknowledge that and address that, then you shouldn't even have told us that, because it seems like there's this really key information about your students that you're not using, that you're totally forgetting when you begin to instruct. So everything that you write here are things that you don't forget once you start to plan and teach. You're keeping all of those things into account and addressing those. Also, there's Canvas video about instructional context, which is this video, and look at the sample. So I've included in Canvas some samples, sample instructional context. I really strongly suggest you read those before you begin typing a draft of your own. So to review, for this assignment, you are going to choose your students, 1 or 2, whatever your directions say. So get your directions out and read them. Talk about those students in relation to the entire standard 1, not just cognitive, not just progress monitoring test data shows this or that. That's not the whole student. That's accomplished teachers know that their mission extends beyond the cognitive. Remember, that is one of the core propositions, proposition 1. So choose your students, fill out the chart, fill out for the whole class, in addition to the students you're going to feature, write your goals, and then just draft out that instructional context. Upload it in Canvas, and you'll get feedback from your PLF before the next meeting. It's a great thing to have this in your rearview mirror because you're going to be way ahead of the game. So that's that. Choose your students, write your goals, draft your instructional context.